In the new Discovery Plus original true crime series Relentless, follow filmmaker Christina Fontana as she helps a family searching for their missing daughter, going down a rabbit hole of drugs, corruption, organized crime, and possibly murder. Relentless, now streaming on Discovery Plus. Start your free trial. In the new Discovery Plus original true crime series Relentless, follow filmmaker Christina Fontana as she helps a family searching for their missing daughter, going down a rabbit hole of drugs, corruption, organized crime, and possibly murder. Relentless, now streaming on Discovery Plus. Start your free trial.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is a morning update. What's up, everybody, and welcome to the program. Hope you're all having a fantastic Wednesday so far. And if not, well, just think. It's almost the weekend. You're almost there. So you got to suffer for a couple of more days, and then, folks, it is the weekend. So hopefully, your favorite bearded loudmouth will help you get through that work week. Now we're going to start that process today by diving in to the article that Tara Palmieri put out in Politico a few days ago. Now this is a very long article, and it goes into detail about Jeffrey Epstein and how his whole entire operation basically could not have been what it was without the help of the females around him. And when you think about sex trafficking, obviously you automatically think about these scuzzbag dudes that are engaged in it, right? That's the obvious choice. Those are the obvious people to take a look at. And more times than not, it is some scuzzbag dude that's running the show. Well, according to reports, roughly 39% of people involved in human trafficking are women. And it just seems more dastardly to me, more draconian, when a woman is involved in something like this. Because what happens is these women build trust with these girls or other women. They bring them into the nexus, and before you know it, you're caught up in the web. And it's a lot easier for these girls, these women, to trust somebody prim and polished like, say, Ghislaine Maxwell, as opposed to some brutish-ass dude who isn't educated or schooled or anything like that. So you get this false sense of security with somebody like Ghislaine Maxwell or with a woman in general, right? And these women in turn use that trust to end up bringing these girls into the fold. And from there, it becomes the nightmare that we have seen time and time again reported on by these survivors. So Tara Palmieri did a fantastic job with this piece. It's super long, so we're going to do it in a couple of parts. But I've been meaning to get to this the last few days, and I told you last weekend that we were going to get to it. But I wanted to make sure that I had the time to sit down and really hammer it out. Like I said, it's pretty extensive, and instead of doing it all as one long episode, I'm going to break it down into a few parts here. So with that said, let's jump in to this article by Tara Palmieri over at the Politico. Headline: The Women Who Enabled Jeffrey Epstein. It was a crisp gray day in January 2020 when I stepped out of my Uber onto what looked like industrial wasteland. A concrete scape dotted with smokestacks and graffitied shipping containers. I pushed through the glass door of an old brick factory and found myself inside the pristine walls of the Manna Contemporary Art Center. In the lobby, I waited until a petite woman with jet black hair walked in with her Yorkshire Terrier, Mosey. This was Rena O, and she had asked me to meet her in the studio space in Jersey City, New Jersey, where she paints and sculpts. Now, Rena O was allegedly one of Jeffrey Epstein's recruiters. You have Virginia, who came out and spoke on Rena O, and you also have Marjik also, who came out and spoke about Rena and her involvement with Jeffrey Epstein. Now, Rena has her side of the story as well, right? Saying that she was a victim, this, that, the other thing. And certainly trying to set it up as somebody who was being abused by Epstein. And that is why she was engaging in abuse as well. Now, if I believe that story, well, that's a completely different conversation. But I'll just leave it to you like this. I believe what Virginia has to say. And until some evidence is provided to show me differently, I'm going to go with what we have compiled throughout the years here. And I'm going to have to say that Virginia and the survivors, their story has done nothing but ring true this whole entire time. So when you have people like Rena O, who try and act like that they weren't part of Jeffrey Epstein's operation, it takes a lot of evidence to prove that, right? A recurring subject of her art is Jeffrey Epstein, the well-connected financier, pedophile, who died in a New York jail cell in 2019, allegedly, while being held on sex trafficking charges. O's studio featured an oil painting of Epstein's friend, the Joe Exotic of the Windsor family, aka Prince Andrew, as Bacchus, the god of wine, and next to it, a painting of a nude Ghislaine Maxwell, who has been charged with recruiting underage girls for Epstein, holding the forbidden fruit in what O calls the Garden of Sin. The tone of her paintings was neither critical nor celebratory, just strange. And I could definitely see that. This Rena O lady definitely comes off as rather odd from the articles that I've read and from the quotes that we've seen from her. She certainly strikes me as quite the odd duck. No doubt about it. And, you know, with what Virginia had to say and others, it's hard, right, to believe anything that comes out of these people's mouths. O's fascination with Epstein is not abstract. She knew him personally as someone who was in a romantic relationship with Epstein that came to include finding other women for him to meet. Although O had never spoken to the press or to the authorities, she was willing to share her story with me for a podcast I was working on about Epstein called Broken, Seeking Justice. I wanted to understand what it was like to be part of his circle and why she had done it. Now, again, Tara Palmieri is the one who really brought this stuff to the forefront here. And of all the people who have jumped into the sphere with podcasts and stories and latched their names onto the case and all of that stuff, Tara Palmieri has been one of the best and the brightest in my opinion. She has done a fantastic job covering this story, digging deeper, and unearthing things that other folks weren't willing to talk about or weren't able to find. And the way she brought it all together on her podcast Broken was absolutely phenomenal. So I think that throughout this whole case, Tara Palmieri has been an absolute asset. And this situation with her unearthing the Rena O portion of this, just more fantastic work by her and her team. O, now 42, told me she had met Epstein in 2000. She was 21 at the time and living in the New York suburbs with her parents when a friend introduced her to a man who would become what O described as a rich, older boyfriend. And again, I don't know if I buy the whole boyfriend thing, right? Jeffrey Epstein had side pieces. Jeffrey Epstein had what he would consider playthings. Rena O as his girlfriend? Yeah, I'm not buying it. I found myself a really great art patron who's going to buy artwork from me, she initially thought. Epstein even offered to pay for her to attend classes at the School of Visual Arts in Manhattan and, for a time, secured a studio for her in Soho. Now, I'm not saying she didn't have anything to do with Epstein. We know that's the case. But, again, everybody's the hero in their own story, right? So as far as calling her his girlfriend, probably a stretch in my opinion. Could be wrong, right? Maybe she was. But Epstein is not that kind of guy. He wanted to have a bunch of girls around him, right? A bunch of younger ladies around him. And he certainly had a type. But it soon became clear Epstein wasn't just a boyfriend or a benefactor. The whole thing got really sketchy when he started asking me, "Are there any cute girls in your class that you can bring over here?" O told me. O might have been creeped out, but she complied with the requests. She told me she introduced 3 young adult women to Epstein. Boy, isn't that nice? Isn't that fantastic? So no matter what, Rena O, you brought 3 girls into Epstein's sphere. Fact, okay? No matter how you want to spin that, no matter how you want to talk about that, that's a fact. It's also a fact that you didn't go to the police after Epstein was arrested, or anything like that. So the question becomes, why not? Why wouldn't you come forward and speak on what you know? And that goes for all of these people that were in Epstein's sphere, like we talk about all the time here. These people should be falling all over themselves to speak with the authorities. 2 of Epstein's accusers, in fact, say O did more than that. Marjik Chartouni, a friend whom O introduced to Epstein when she was 20, told me she was sexually assaulted by both O and Epstein in her first and only encounter with him. Virginia Roberts, one of Epstein's most vocal survivors, who says she was recruited into Epstein's orbit by Maxwell, also accuses O of violence. So you have 2 very solid people right there, right? Virginia and Margie talking about how O was involved in this abuse with Epstein. So you have 2 very credible survivors, very credible witnesses saying that she did this stuff. And the only thing going against what they have to say is what O says herself. So really, like most of this case, it comes down to who do you believe? Who do you think is more credible? For me, rather obvious where I fall here. In a draft of a memoir filed as evidence in a defamation lawsuit, Roberts wrote that O loved bondage, whipping, hitting, and cutting her sex partner with little sharp knives until they subdued to her punishment and agonizing pain. In an interview, Roberts showed me a scar on her upper thigh that she said came from one of these sex acts. She was 17 at the time. So, look, that is some straight up disturbing type of shit, right? Again, whatever people want to do with consenting adults in their bedroom or in private, hey, that's not my business. If you want to go get yourself a weed whacker and you and your partner are into whacking each other in the stomach with it, hey, I don't give a shit. Do whatever you want, man. Not my business. But when you're doing this to people who don't want it done to them, children, people under 18, hell, adults even, then you and I, well, we got a problem. We certainly have a problem in that case. And what occurred here with Epstein and allegedly this Rena lady is absolutely stomach-turning. It's not bad enough, right, that you have to sexually assault somebody. It's not bad enough that you have to rape somebody. But no, now I'm going to torture you and abuse you by cutting you with a knife or a sharp object. What in the hell is wrong with somebody who would want to do that? When I asked about Roberts' allegation, O said she had met Roberts, but she called the accusation a complete fabricated lie. As for the incident with Chartouni, O acknowledged that a sexual encounter took place. But in another interview after our Jersey City meeting, she told me she did not attack Chartouni. I'm sorry, I didn't know what was going to happen. If you had a bad experience, you had a bad experience. But I was not abusive, O said. In later interviews, O blamed Epstein for manipulating her and said she believes Epstein abused her too in the same encounter with Chartouni. And ultimately, this is going to be the excuse from a lot of these women who were involved with Epstein, right? Oh, well, I was being abused too. So I abused in turn. That's not going to cut it for me, though. Once you're an adult, you're an adult. And if these women would have went to the police afterwards, then this would be a whole different story. But they didn't. They kept it to themselves. They kept it secret. They didn't come forward to help other survivors. So now, how can you expect anyone to trust what you have to say? Now that your back's up against the wall, now that you've been called out for your part in this, now you want to play the victim? I'm sorry, but I don't think that's going to work. Ultimately, O said the women she brought to Epstein wanted to meet him, and that she did not know what would happen once she introduced them. Still, Chartouni and Roberts say they believe O was complicit in the abuse they suffered. And I have to agree, right? I have to agree with that. O was getting paid in a studio, all sorts of extras, all sorts of benefits, and her job was to bring girls to Jeffrey Epstein. Now, this is what Virginia and Margique have alleged. And this is what the evidence has proven time and time again. So for Rena to attempt to set herself up as a victim here, I just don't see how that's going to pan out. Jeffrey Epstein has become a near universal villain in the public eye. Dozens of women, some of whom were as young as 14 at the time, have accused him of molesting them over 2 decades, primarily in the 1990s and 2000s in Florida, New York, and New Mexico, as well as on his private Caribbean island. A number of powerful men, from Britain's Prince Andrew to lawyer Alan I Kept My Underpants On Dershowitz, have been accused in court documents of having sex with a young woman Epstein introduced them to. Allegations both men deny. One male associate of Epstein's has been charged in France. That's Jean-Luc Brunel. Other influential men were friends with Epstein or accepted his money. Yet after reporting on Epstein for months and speaking to associates like O, I came to a realization. Beyond these men exists a group of women, possibly even larger, who helped keep Epstein's massive sex trafficking operation running for more than 20 years. And this is an ongoing theme with the Jeffrey Epstein organization. That's why it was a brilliant setup when we're talking in criminal terms. He had all of these women, these unassuming women, young, bit older, educated, working for him to bring all of this together and to have all of these girls brought to him. And it worked perfectly because nobody suspected that these women would be in on it. These other girls, these survivors, trusted them. And in turn, had that trust smashed and shattered and their whole entire lives thrown off course because these women working with Jeffrey Epstein.
Me, but also you. The Pharaoh fast forwards his favorite foreign film, Powder Donut. Okay, what's my line?
The only line I see here on the script is get options based on your budget with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive.
Oh man, that's a tongue twister, huh? I'm sorry, I'm gonna need a few more minutes. Bulbous Walrus, the Bulbous Walrus.
The Name Your Price tool, only from Progressive.
The owl ran afoul of the comatose coxswain.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Brought them in to the Viper's Den. Dozens of these women worked for Epstein formally or informally. If you think of this group as a pyramid, at the top sits Maxwell, a longtime Epstein employee and confidant who now stands accused of recruiting minors for Epstein and sex trafficking a 14-year-old girl. Charges she denies. Below her were women Epstein employed as assistants who allegedly scheduled and managed dozens of minors for Epstein to abuse. There were also women like O who brought friends to meet Epstein and received gifts or access to his wealth. Now, folks, how in the hell is that not a RICO case? How can you tell me this is not a criminal conspiracy that is being run as an enterprise? 100% that's what it is. We know that Maxwell was the lieutenant, and underneath her was the core four, and then came all of these other ladies. That, my friends, is a criminal conspiracy. That, my friends, warrants RICO charges for everybody involved. Somehow, we have yet to see those charges materialize, though. These women aren't household names. Well, to you folks they are, and to the rest of the world they should be. There is no reason why I have spent every single day, folks, since October 1st of 2019 talking about this story, while the legacy media is out there playing touch ass and engaging in tribalism. All these names should be household names. Even for people following Epstein's story. But his survivors say they were key to grooming and deceiving them and allowing Epstein to operate with impunity. In fact, most of Epstein's survivors were introduced to him through other women, according to the 12 survivors I've spoken with over the past year and a half, as well as dozens of allegations in court and in the media. Often survivors say it was the women around Epstein who tried to make them feel comfortable, as if what they were experiencing was normal or harmless. And you add to that these girls came from backgrounds that were riddled with broken homes, problems, drugs, abuse, and they have no idea what the upper crust of society is or how they live. They think this shit is normal. Oh, this is how they live. Oh, this is what rich people do. Meanwhile, it's not the case, and the working poor, all of us compared to them, are nothing but chattel. To be used, abused, and discarded at their will, be it in some foreign war, or if they're just deciding to abuse your children here in the States. Once Epstein began to face legal scrutiny, other women made it easier for him to rehabilitate himself and reemerge with his power and social cachet largely intact. 2 women served as the lead prosecutors on his case when he was first facing charges in 2006 and were closely involved in crafting his federal non-prosecution agreement, plea deal, and lenient sentence. For those without deep knowledge of the case, Epstein's short incarceration of 13 months in a county jail could be read as a signal that, whatever crime he had committed, it wasn't that bad. After his release, a number of female socialites and professionals helped to welcome Epstein, by then a registered sex offender, back into so-called elite circles. His abuse then continued, court documents assert, because remember, folks, the only crime that you can commit when you're in one of these elite circles, these so-called elite circles, is being broke. If you're poor, that is the worst crime you could possibly ever commit in the eyes of these people. You can molest people, whatever you want. Doesn't matter, as long as you have dough. As long as you can be seen as an asset financially. Besides that, you are nothing to these people. To point this out is not to excuse any of the men or prestigious institutions, universities, banks, funds that also help to protect Epstein, nor is it meant to hold women to a higher standard. But as a woman myself, I have been struck by the sheer number of women around Epstein, and many of the survivors I've spoken with say they feel especially betrayed by those who violated the unspoken rule that women protect other women, especially minors. And I always thought that was an unspoken rule, right? I never, ever, ever, ever in my mind thought that women were this involved in human trafficking. But after all of the stuff that we have uncovered here, all of the articles we have covered, it's quite obvious now that women, unfortunately, play a central role in situations like this. This dynamic is becoming more complicated as survivors seek money from a compensation fund set up by Epstein's estate. The fund, designed by lawyers involved in other high-profile cases of survivor compensation, including 9/11, has received more than 175 claims since last summer and paid out more than $67 million to an unspecified number of individuals. So we know that the compensation fund has been paying out money. Now, is it paying out a proper amount to these ladies? I don't know. Right? Nobody's come out and talked about it or anything like that. I'm sure they all have to sign non-disclosures about the amount and stuff. But there's guaranteed a lot of these women who were working as recruiters for Epstein have themselves set up where they think they're going to get money from this compensation fund as they try and posit themselves as actual victims. It's a murky case, right? There's a lot of gray area here, and I'm certainly not qualified to hammer all of that out. Who's a victim, who's not? Well, we'll have to leave that up to the courts, right? Now, we can have our opinions for sure. And for me, the guideline that I go by is, what have the actual survivors come out and said? The people that they have named as people who have abused them, I believe them. Point blank, period. So Rena O and all of these other ladies who are now coming out and saying that they were also abused by Epstein or victimized by Epstein, where were you when the first arrest happened? Why didn't you come forward and tell the police and the investigators, yeah, what's going on here? This is bad, even worse than you imagine. Because you were still benefiting. So, again, if you were named by one of these survivors, then my opinion is that you're somebody that should be investigated. Among those who have sought or received restitution are women like Chartouni, who were purely victims of Epstein's predation, but also women whose cases are more complex. Those who both introduced other women to Epstein and who say they were abused by him. Epstein wielded his power, wealth, and age over women who were both victims and victimizers. And he worked to convert the former into the latter, leaning on the women he lured in to find more adult and teenage women for him. And that's why the core four is the most important piece here, in my opinion. If you bring the core four to justice, then they're certainly going to talk about the other people who are working underneath them, right? Nobody wants to go down alone when it comes to this kind of thing. And these women who were working with Jeffrey Epstein, these women who were working as recruiters for Jeffrey Epstein, and these women who are now trying to set themselves up as victims, well, the number one question should be, where were you after the first arrest when Epstein could have really been put up to dry? O, in fact, also has applied for restitution and is being represented by the same victims' rights lawyer as Chartouni. What? Again, a lot of these lawyers, folks, are not good people. I'll say that till the cows come home. I am not a fan of lawyers in most respects. A lot of them are money grubbing, and a lot of them don't really care about what's going on. They just want to get paid. Now, that's not all the lawyers in this case, right? But that's certainly something that I have noticed with lawyers just in general. And you see it in this case as well. In an email to Politico, O characterized Epstein's offers of tuition and the Soho studio as tools of his prolonged and repeated sexual abuse. Or, let me play devil's advocate, those were payments for a job well done. She brought other girls in, and her payment was the school, was the housing, and all of the extras that went along with it. So let's not act like she wasn't being paid for this while it was happening. Now, when we want a Monday morning quarterback it, she's going to try and say that that was part of the abuse? All right, well, look, I guess we'll let the courts figure that out. You don't know what's happening to you, O told me in one of our interviews. Epstein eventually dumped her after she refused to meet some of his friends for dinner. I was lied to, and I was used, she said, and unlike many, many people, I walked away. Oh, give me a break. You walked away? According to you, you were dumped, whatever that means. Again, I don't believe that she was his girlfriend ever, okay? A plaything, perhaps. One of his low-level associates, definitely. Girlfriend? Yeah, hard-pressed to believe that. And to be honest with you, I'm hard-pressed to believe any of Rena O's story. That's my personal opinion. She might be telling the truth, folks, but the old gut is telling me differently. And so far in this case, my spidey sense has been pretty much right on. So I'll continue to go with my gut that's backed up by the evidence, as opposed to what somebody who is being pointed to as a recruiter has to say. Now again, folks, look, it's just my opinion, right? Doesn't mean that, it's the tabernacle truth. Take my opinion, like I always say, and $1.50 down to the corner store and you can get yourself a coffee. More than 3 years into the hashtag #MeToo movement, the Epstein saga offers an extreme and still evolving example of how complex questions of responsibility can get in cases of sexual abuse. In Epstein's world, women both were survivors of a hostile environment and sometimes also reaped the benefits of their association with him, or worse. Still, exactly how Jeffrey Epstein got away with years of abuse remains an open question, one many of his survivors are still working to expose. Answering it requires understanding the complicated motivations and actions of the many women around him. Folks, that will complete part 1 of this very informative, very long piece by Tara Palmieri. Now, part 2 will be out later on tonight, and then we'll finish it off with part 3 tomorrow morning. So if you'd like to contact me, you can do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI @protonmail.com. You can also find me at Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. All of the links that go with this episode can be found in the description box. All right, folks, we'll be back later on with part 2. And until then, I will catch you all later.
Having your own home is awesome, but it's also a lot of work. The good news? Finding help for your projects is easier than ever. Introducing Angie, the app that puts all your home care needs at your fingertips. Need a pro to fix that emergency leak? Maybe find someone to build a deck, or even set your seasonal tasks on autopilot. Angie can handle all that and more. Expert pros, hundreds of home projects, clear pricing, and the easiest way to book and pay in seconds. This is Angie, your home for everything home. Download the app today.
Order a bite of spicy perfection. Pick up a McDonald's Hot and Spicy McChicken. It's made with crispy chicken seasoned with a bold mix of spices and served on a warm, toasty bun. The Hot and Spicy McChicken is so spicy, so crispy, so irresistible, you may be tempted to have more than one, and that's okay. Now get 2 Hot and Spicy McChicken sandwiches for just $2. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. Prices and participation may vary. Cannot be combined with any other offer or combo meal. Single item at regular price.